My girlfriend went on vacation with her supposedly gay best friend. They don't know I'm at the airport waiting for them. My girlfriend Emma told me she was going to Cancun with her girls. Just the girls. She promised. 2 days in, her friend posted an Instagram story from a coffee shop in our city. I called the friend. What? That trip got canceled months ago. Emma said she told you. My stomach dropped. I checked Emma's Instagram. Beach photos. Sunset cocktails. Girls trip. Captions. But something was wrong. No group selfies. No photos with anyone. Just her. And carefully cropped shots. Then I saw it. A reflection in her sunglasses. A man's figure. Shirtless. A tattoo. Dragon wrapped around a sword. Connor, her best friend, the one who was like a brother, the one whose apartment she'd sleep at after late study sessions, the one I had nothing to worry about. I checked his profile, private, but his bio had changed off the grid, no 15 to no 22, the exact dates of Emma's girls' trip. I logged into our shared iPad, found her email, United Airlines, 2 tickets, Emma Vasquez and Connor Reed, returning November 22nd, 4:35 p.m. I was already in the car. I remember the texture of the steering wheel under my hands, the way it felt slightly tacky from the cold, that specific grippy kind of cold that only exists in November parking garages, the kind that makes your knuckles ache. I was wearing the gray Henley I'd pulled on that morning without thinking, the one with the fraying cuff on the left wrist where I'd snagged it on a cabinet handle 6 months ago and never bothered to fix it. There was a gas station receipt on the passenger seat, $2.11. I remember it because I needed something real to look at while my chest figured out what it was doing. The drive to O'Hare was 23 minutes. I know because I watched the GPS clock the whole way. Not because I needed directions, but because I needed something to count. The terminal signs came up in green and white, and I followed them the way you follow anything when the higher order parts of your brain have quietly stepped aside. Mechanically, correctly, without meaning, I found short-term parking on level 4. I took the ticket from the machine, I folded it in half and put it in my back pocket. I walked to the elevator without running. I had 38 minutes. I had enough time to be calm about this. I was in fact calm. That part scared me more than anything else. I want to explain Emma to you because the Emma I'm about to describe is not the Emma I thought I was living with. And the gap between those two women is where this story actually lives. I met Emma Vasquez at a DePaul campus event in the fall, 3 years before any of this happened. She was laughing at something her friend said, leaning back in her chair with her whole body, and I remember thinking that people don't usually laugh like that in rooms full of strangers. Openly, without performing it. That was the thing about Emma then. She seemed genuinely uncalculated. She wore the same 3 sweaters in rotation. She could not make a decision at a restaurant without reading the menu twice, and she always ordered something she'd never had before. She was studying marketing, but she wanted to write. She never told anyone that except me, and I understood the weight of the telling. We moved in together 14 months later. The apartment on Fletcher Street, 3rd floor, no elevator, a bathroom window that overlooked a parking lot, and a single tree that looked exactly like every sad tree in every sad city poem, which Emma pointed out the first week we lived there and laughed about every time she had to use the bathroom in winter. That was us. That tree was us. Something unremarkable that we'd made into a reference, a joke, a small private architecture that felt like home. Connor had been in Emma's life since before I was. She'd known him since sophomore year of college. He was her emergency contact. He was the person she called when her car died on the 290 at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in February. Not me, because I was working a closing shift and she didn't want to bother me. I knew that story because she told me. I knew it and filed it away as evidence of thoughtfulness, not red flags. Connor was gay, she'd said. Well, she'd said basically gay, which I now understand is not a thing but wasn't something I'd examined carefully enough at the time. He had a girlfriend named Natalie who I'd met twice, at a birthday party and a New Year's gathering, and who had seemed like a perfectly specific and real person, the kind who keeps the receipts from nice meals and texts in complete sentences. I had not thought about Natalie in a long time. I had not thought about a lot of things. The first time something felt slightly wrong was in August. Emma had come home late from what she said was drinks with colleagues. She worked in brand partnerships at a mid-sized agency in the Loop, the kind of place where drinks with colleagues was genuinely a regular occurrence. And she smelled different. Not like alcohol or perfume. She smelled like the inside of someone else's apartment, a specific warm fabric softener smell that wasn't ours. I noticed it. I said nothing. I told myself I was being paranoid and went to bed. In September, she started going to the gym earlier in the morning. I knew it was the gym because she came home damp and pink and in workout clothes, and I had no reason not to believe her. She had been saying she wanted to be more consistent with her routine. I thought it was good. I made her coffee while she showered. I am telling you this because I want you to understand that I was not ignoring evidence I chose not to see. I was genuinely failing to assemble it. There's a difference. I've spent enough time in the last year understanding that difference to be certain. October. Connor came to our apartment for the first time. He'd been over before, but always in the context of group things, parties, that kind of gathering. This time, he came alone, supposedly to return a jacket Emma had left at his place. He stayed for dinner. He was easy to be around. I remember thinking he was one of those people who's very good at making a room feel smaller in the pleasant way. The way that makes you feel like you've known someone longer than you have. He had dark hair, good shoes, the kind of fitness that looks effortless because it's been effortful for long enough. He asked me about my work. I'm in commercial property management, not glamorous, but stable, and he asked the right follow-up questions. He seemed interested. He shook my hand at the door when he left and said we should all get dinner sometime. We never did. 2 weeks after that dinner, Emma brought up the Cancun trip. Her friend group had been talking about it for a while, she said. Sarah, Ashley, Maria, the usual people. They'd found a good deal on a villa rental. She'd done the math and it was only going to be $340 each for the accommodation, which was reasonable. She wanted to go. She seemed to want it straightforwardly, openly, the way she wanted things before I understood she'd developed a parallel way of wanting. I said yes. Of course I said yes. I helped her pack. I drove her to the airport on November 15 at 6:20 in the morning. She kissed me at the departures drop-off and said she'd miss me and that she'd call me every night. She called me every night. I want to say that plainly. She called. She described restaurants. She complained about the heat. She sounded like herself. She was performing herself so precisely that I had no note to give. Then it was November 17th, and Maria posted a story from a coffee shop on Belmont, and everything that had been not quite visible suddenly wasn't hidden anymore. I found a parking spot in Terminal C. I took the elevator down and walked through the automatic doors, and the cold outside air turned to the warm recycled airport air. And I bought a bottle of water from a Hudson News and drank about half of it standing by a support column, looking at the arrivals board. United 1847, arriving from Cancun, on time, gate C22, baggage claim 7. I put my cap on, not to hide from Emma, exactly. More because I needed something to do with my hands and adjusting the brim was something to do. I found a position near the escalators where I could see the full sweep of the baggage claim floor. And I stood there and I waited and my phone buzzed. Hey babe, girls are grabbing one last drink at the airport bar. Sarah's driving me home. Can't wait to see you. I read it twice. Sarah was in Phoenix. I knew this because Sarah had posted a story from her cousin's quinceañera 3 days ago, tagged at a venue in Scottsdale. Ashley was at work. She was a nurse, rotating shifts, and she'd mentioned Sunday overtime in a comment on Emma's beach photos that I hadn't looked at closely enough until now. Maria was in Portland. Maria had moved there in September. Emma knew this. Emma was the one who had thrown the going-away party. She sent that text at 3:52 p.m. She sent it knowing all three of those things were false, knowing I had no way to check, knowing that the only version of reality available to me was the one she was handing me. That was the part that settled into me in the minutes after. Not the betrayal exactly, but the engineering of it, the backward planning required to construct and maintain something that detailed. That was not impulsiveness. That was deliberate. She was deliberate. I was starting to understand that. The escalator began delivering people. Families first, then couples, then a group of older men with golf bags. I watched the top of the escalator the way you watch the surface of water for something you've dropped and can't quite see yet. And then there she was, Emma, new tan, a white sundress I had never seen, her hair loose in a way she usually saved for occasions. She hated hair in her face at airports. She always said she always put it up, but here it was down, which told me she had put it down recently for someone who liked to see it that way. Her eyes were on her phone, still laughing at something on the screen, and then there was Connor's hand, on her lower back. Not the hand of someone making a polite gesture in a crowd. The hand of someone who had spent a week learning where to put it, how much pressure, how to make it look like habit. They were laughing at something on his phone. He tilted the screen toward her and she grabbed his wrist to angle it, and in that grab was a whole language I had no grammar for anymore. 20 feet, 15, 10. She looked up and saw me, and the laughter left her face the way heat leaves a room when you open a window in winter. Complete, immediate, non-negotiable. Ryan, what are you? Sarah's in town, I said. Ashley's at work. Maria's in Portland. I was not performing evenness. I had used up the jagged parts of this in the car, alone where no one had to witness it, and what was left was something quieter and considerably colder. She looked at me, and I watched her understand that the version of me she'd calculated, the version that would stand at home and wait and believe the story, was not the version that was standing in front of her. Connor stepped forward. He looked genuinely confused, which was, in retrospect, one of the few authentic expressions in the room. Bro, what's going on? Something moved across his face. A small recalibration, the kind you make when a familiar situation suddenly rearranges itself into something different. Bro, he said slowly, she told me you two were separated, that you were only living together because of the lease. The ground tilted slightly, not metaphorically. I mean, there was a moment where the sensory information coming through the soles of my shoes did not feel continuous with the soles of my feet. We had sex 2 nights before she left for Cancun, I said. Connor went very still, then he stepped back from Emma. Not dramatically, quietly, like someone discovering that the floor they were standing on was not rated for the weight they'd put on it. Natalie, he said. His voice was flat. What the— Stop, Emma said, her voice cracked down the middle. You said you were done with him. Connor was louder now, not yelling, the particular loudness of someone who has been holding something that just became too heavy to hold quietly. I left my girlfriend for you. You said you were leaving him, not all at once, but progressively. First the couple nearest us, then the family with the stroller, then the older woman who had been walking toward baggage claim 7 and simply slowed to a stop 5 feet away, luggage handle still extended, watching. Emma had backed against a pillar, her hands were at her sides and she was not reaching for anyone. I was going to tell you both, after the trip. I just needed time. So this whole trip was what? A test drive. See which one of us you liked better? Something at her collarbone that had not been there when I dropped her off 8 days ago. I had kissed her at departures. She had been wearing a tank top under her jacket. I had seen her collarbone. I knew what was and wasn't there. Is that a promise ring? Much quieter. Last night, at that restaurant on the beach. When you told me you loved me and were going to tell him everything. 2 officers, unhurried, responding to the shape of a situation rather than any specific emergency. The elderly couple had stepped around us entirely. A teenager with headphones had not moved, phone out, which I noticed and did not address. Emma looked between us. Her face was doing something I had no name for. It was not guilt exactly, or not only guilt, it was something more like the expression of a person who has been running 2 different calculations simultaneously for so long that having them collapse into the same room at the same time had produced a kind of system error. She had run out of versions of herself to deploy. Screen up, visible to all 3 of us. Mom, she declined it. It rang again. I looked at her. Answer it. She put it on speaker. Her hands were shaking. I watched her thumb find the button and press it, and the ambient noise of the terminal swallowed the first half-second of her mother's voice. Emma, thank God. Is Ryan with you? Mom, yes, he's here. Either of you. A pause, long enough to change the temperature of the air. There's been a fire. 3rd floor, an electrical fault in the unit 2 doors down from ours, which had spread to the hallway and taken significant damage to 3 apartments, including ours. Before the CFD got it contained. No fatalities. No one hurt. Our door had been closed and that had bought our apartment enough time for most of it to survive. But the hallway was gone, the bathroom window, the parking lot, the sad tree. All of it was either damaged or destroyed or filled with smoke and water. I stood in Terminal C with Emma on one side of me and Connor on the other side, and a security officer who had decided correctly that the situation did not require intervention standing at a respectful distance. And I understood that every physical object I had used to organize my life was either ruined or inaccessible, and that understanding sat strangely next to the other understanding that had arrived 8 days earlier in a parking garage when I'd first started to suspect. Connor left the terminal first. He said nothing to Emma when he left. He pulled his rolling bag off the carousel when it came. He collected his jacket, he shook his head once in a way that was addressed to no one, and he walked toward the exit and the ride-share pickup in whatever version of his life existed on the other side of this day. Emma called her mother back on the way to my car. I drove. She sat in the passenger seat with her window slightly open and talked to her mother in a voice I could hear but wasn't listening to. And I watched the road and the signs and the toll lanes and the city emerge on the horizon the way it always does coming back from O'Hare. That specific angle of downtown that makes it look assembled rather than built. I had already texted Marcus while we were waiting for her bag. Marcus Webb had been my uncle's attorney for 11 years and had become, over time, the kind of person I called when I needed to think clearly about something that had legal dimensions. He was methodical in the way that people who have spent decades reading contracts are methodical, not slow but precise, and committed to precision in a way that felt like care. I'd called him once before, 2 years ago, about a lease dispute in a building I managed, and he had resolved it in 9 days. I texted him at 4:22 p.m. and said I need to talk to you about a domestic situation and a property loss. Tonight, if possible. He replied at 4:31, my office at 7, I'll have coffee. Emma was staying at her parents' house in Elmhurst. I drove her there in silence. When I pulled up, she sat for a moment with her hand on the door handle and then said, Ryan, I am so sorry. I said, I know. She got out. I drove to Marcus's office on LaSalle. I want to be specific about what Marcus and I discussed, because the specificity matters. The apartment on Fletcher Street was in my name. I had signed the lease 2 months before Emma moved in, and when we'd renewed it the following year, I had, without particular intention, renewed it in my name alone. Emma had never been on the lease. This was not strategic. It simply was. The significance of this became clear to Marcus before it was clear to me. The renter's insurance policy was also in my name, The personal property coverage was $47,500. The additional living expense coverage, which would cover temporary housing while the apartment was being repaired, ran to $3,200 per month for up to 12 months. I was covered. Emma was not. This was not something I had engineered. It was something I discovered in Marcus's office at 7:49 p.m. on November 22nd, while drinking the worst cup of coffee I have ever had in my adult life. And the discovery produced in me not satisfaction but something quieter, the particular stillness that arrives when events arrange themselves into a shape that does not require your intervention. Marcus also walked me through the shared bank accounts. Emma and I had a joint account, opened when we moved in together, which we'd used for household expenses, groceries, utilities, rent, things like that. We each had our own accounts, but we both contributed to the joint one monthly. The balance was $4,840. The account was in both names. My attorney recommended that I move quickly on separating my finances. I did so the following morning. There was also the matter of the lease itself. The building was undergoing repairs. The landlord had contacted me, not Emma, me because I was on the lease, to discuss the repair timeline and the temporary relocation allowance. The timeline was 12 to 16 weeks. The relocation allowance was $2,800, payable directly to me. I found temporary housing within 48 hours. A furnished one-bedroom in Lincoln Square, $1,950 a month, which my renter's insurance covered entirely. I moved what remained of our belongings, mine as it turned out, legally speaking, into a storage unit on Western Avenue and then into the Lincoln Square apartment. And I did not contact Emma during any of this, except to send her a single email with a list of the items I had identified as hers that I would make available for pickup by appointment. She picked them up on a Thursday in December. Her father drove her. He shook my hand at the door. He did not make eye contact. The recording came from Sarah. Sarah Okonkwo had been Emma's friend since undergraduate, which made her one of the original fixtures in that circle, one of the people Emma had named as a member of the Cancun trip that had never existed. Sarah was not in Phoenix. Sarah was in fact 30 minutes away from me at the time of Emma's text, and she had been attempting to reach Emma for 3 days about something that Emma had been avoiding. When I reached out to Sarah 2 weeks after the airport, she was not difficult to talk to. She was angry, not at me. She hadn't done anything to me except be named in a lie, but at Emma, for a series of events that predated my awareness by approximately 6 months. Sarah told me that she had known about Connor since May. She had found out because Emma had told her, in confidence, at a birthday dinner for another friend at a restaurant called the Bristol on Dammon. Emma had told her and asked her to keep it. Sarah had kept it longer than she was comfortable with, and had recently, the week before the Cancun trip, told Emma that she was not willing to keep it anymore. This was the conversation Emma had been avoiding. Sarah also told me that Connor's girlfriend, Natalie, the one he had by his own account in the terminal, left for Emma, had reached out to her. Natalie's name was Natalie Park. She had been with Connor for 2 years. She had found out about Emma not from Connor, but from a notification, a shared location feature on an app they both used, which had shown Connor's phone in a location that didn't match what he'd told her. She'd started documenting in August. Natalie's documentation was thorough. I mean thorough in the specific admissible sense. She had screenshots of 214 text messages between Emma and Connor covering the period of May through November. She had a log of dates, times, and locations cross-referenced against what Connor had told her he was doing. She had 2 recordings from their apartment, legal in Illinois under the one-party consent rule, in which Connor described his relationship with Emma in terms that were specific and unambiguous, and that contradicted in precise detail things he had told Natalie about the status of his relationship with her. She had done this, she told me when we spoke, because she had wanted to understand what was real. That's all she'd wanted. She needed the record to prove to herself that she was not imagining it. The recordings were not something I needed for any legal purpose. The apartment situation was already resolved in my favor. The financial separation was underway, and there was no custody to fight for. No shared property beyond what we'd already divided. What the recordings did was close a specific door. They confirmed that the version of events I had assembled was complete. That I had not missed a door, a room, a passage. The architecture of the lie was the shape I thought it was. I shared none of this with Emma directly. What I did share in early January was a letter through Marcus, a formal notice of my intent to pursue Emma for my share of several expenses she had charged to a credit card we had both been authorized users on, a card in her name primarily, but one I had contributed to paying down. The charges in question: 2 round-trip flights on United Airlines, $847, a villa rental in Cancun for 8 nights, $2,340, and various incidental expenses including restaurant charges, activity bookings, and a necklace purchased at a jewelry store in Playa del Carmen, $310. Total, $3,497. My attorney sent the letter. Emma's attorney responded. We settled for $2,100, paid in February in 2 installments. I did not push for the full amount. I did not need to. The letter accomplished what it was designed to accomplish, which was not money. Marcus had also suggested gently that I might want to consider whether any of the misrepresentations Emma had made over the preceding months rose to the level of fraud. Specifically, she had used our joint account to purchase items related to the Cancun trip while representing those purchases to me as ordinary household expenses. A flight booked in July, luggage purchased in October, a travel insurance policy, collectively, $1,640. I chose not to pursue this formally, but I asked Marcus to note it in writing, and he did, and the document exists. I want to be precise about something that is easy to get wrong from the outside. I was not building a case against Emma because I wanted to punish her. I was building a record because I had spent 8 months in an environment in which my understanding of reality was being systematically and competently altered, and the record was how I proved to myself that I was not the one who was confused. That distinction matters to me. I am not sure it would matter to Emma, but it matters to me. In February, I ran into Connor at a coffee shop on Milwaukee Avenue. This was not engineered. I was picking up an order I'd placed on an app, and he was sitting at a table near the window with a laptop and a headphone in one ear. And he looked up when I came in, and we had about 2 seconds of recognition before either of us had to decide what to do with it. He took the headphone out. I picked up my order. I walked over to his table. "You doing okay?" I asked. He looked at me for a moment. He was not the person from the terminal. That person had a hand on someone's lower back and a belief in the shape of the thing he thought he'd built. This person was quieter, the kind of quiet that settles in when something you've invested in returns nothing. "Not really," he said. I left. The reckoning, such as it was, did not happen at a dinner table or in a courtroom. It happened in pieces, in conversations, in documents, in the slow accumulation of clarity that arrives not all at once, but in layers, each one adding to the one before until the full shape is finally visible. The public version, the airport, the escalator, the dropped faces, and the circle of strangers who had stopped moving, that was only the first layer. Everything after was quieter. The full picture. Emma had maintained 2 relationships simultaneously for 6 months. She had used our shared finances to fund a vacation with the other man. She had invented a social framework, the girls' trip, the named friends, the daily phone calls, with enough operational detail to function under casual scrutiny. She had told Connor that she and I were effectively over, which freed him emotionally in a way that made him willing to leave Natalie, which she had not told me. She had been operating on the assumption that the system she'd built was stable enough to hold until she decided to dismantle it. What she had not accounted for was Instagram, specifically Maria's story, specifically a coffee shop on Belmont with geolocation enabled. Specifically the fact that the whole thing had a visible seam if you knew where to look. And once I knew where to look, I could not stop seeing it. The airline records, the United Airlines confirmation email, sent to the shared iPad email, sitting in a folder Emma had not thought to check because she assumed it would never matter. Emma Vasquez and Connor Reed, returning November 22nd, 4:35 p.m., seat assignments 14C and 14D. The bank statement showing the flight charge, $423.50 to my share of the joint account, recorded in July as travel under a filing system Emma maintained, which I had never had occasion to examine closely. The single photograph, a selfie Emma had taken and not posted, found in the shared photo roll on the iPad because she had not logged out of iCloud. Her, Connor, a beach, his arm around her. Her face turned up toward his, the dragon and sword tattoo visible at the edge of the frame, the same tattoo I had reconstructed from a reflection in a pair of sunglasses on a beach 2,000 miles away. I showed Marcus these things not because they were legally necessary, but because he had asked me to bring everything. He looked at them in order, set them on his desk face down when he was done with each one, and then sat back in his chair. "You know," he said, "in 30 years I have never had a client who found the whole thing in a reflection in a pair of sunglasses. The renter's insurance paid out fully, $47,500 in personal property coverage, $3,200 per month in additional living expenses running until February. When I moved out of the Lincoln Square apartment and into a 2-bedroom on the north side that I chose specifically because it had a second room I could use as an office, the $2,100 settlement from Emma arrived in 2 installments as agreed. My attorney's fees totaled $4,800, which was less than I'd expected and more than I'd hoped. Natalie filed a separate civil complaint against Connor for fraudulent misrepresentation. She had quit a job in Denver and relocated to Chicago specifically because he had told her their relationship was serious and they were building toward a life there. The relocation had cost her approximately $8,400. I am not party to that case and do not know its outcome, but Marcus told me that her attorney was someone he knew and respected, and he said it in the tone he uses when he thinks something is going to resolve favorably. Emma left the agency where she worked in March. Whether that was voluntary, I don't know. She moved back to Elmhurst, at least initially. I know this only because Sarah mentioned it in a text she sent me in April, checking in, which I appreciated and responded to briefly. I have not spoken to Emma since the letter. The apartment on Fletcher Street reopened in mid-February. I drove past it once, not on purpose. I was taking a different route because of construction on Fullerton, and Fletcher was the detour. I looked up at the third floor. The bathroom window was new. The tree was still there. That was enough. My life now is smaller in the ways that matter, and larger in the ways I didn't expect. The office on the north side is where I work most mornings before I leave for site visits. The city looks different from this building. Lower, wider, more of the lake. I run 3 times a week along the lakefront path, and in February, when it was still cold and the path was nearly empty, I would sometimes stop at the northern breakwater and stand there for a while and look at the water, which does not require anything of you and does not perform and does not maintain a parallel version of itself for your benefit. I think about the precision of it sometimes. Not Emma's precision. I've made my peace with the shape of what she was doing, or I've made the peace that's available, which is not the same thing, but is what there is. I think about my own precision, the 46 minutes between the Instagram story and the iPad, the 38 minutes between reading the email and arriving at the terminal, the 2 seconds between seeing Connor at the coffee shop and deciding what to do. The way clarity, when it finally arrives, is not loud. It is the opposite of loud. It is the specific, surgical, quiet fact of knowing exactly where you are and how you got there. I still have the gas station receipt, $2.11. It's in a drawer in the office. I don't know why I kept it. I do know why I kept it. She got a necklace.